Good morning, race fans. All right, we're continuing with the Oldsmobile DX diesel block 350 cubic inch engine, and we're using the ProComp cylinder heads aluminum, which are a copy of the Edelbrock Performer RPM cylinder heads. And this video is just to let you know about some of the more mundane obstacles that you're going to run into when you're doing a conversion of this kind. The essential problem here is that we're adapting a diesel block into a gasoline engine, and I've talked about some of those problems in the last video. But we're adapting a cylinder head that was designed to run on a big block application to a small block deck height, right? The small block Oldsmobiles, the 350, are shorter than the 455s and related engines. So that creates a couple of issues, right? I'll just show you in passing here that I had both heads on earlier, mocked up, and my Performer intake, which is right here. You've been warned, maybe in a few books you've seen, that only the Performer RPM will work on these because of the size of the ports. And when I laid it on, I drew a line with my Sharpie to show where the top of the intake manifold lay on this setup. And you can see it's so close there that the ports technically would work because they're a lot smaller, but I'd have probably leaks. I would have a lot of trouble getting that sealed, and it's not going to make the right kind of power anyway when the ports are that much smaller, right? So you're going to lose a lot of velocity when you all of a sudden hit such a bigger area. So you've heard that. You got to use the Performer RPM, and I'm confirming that for you. I should be getting one a little later today. Okay, so today we're talking about head gasket issues primarily and intake manifold issues, and I'll try to make it quick. Okay, first of all, I've had to buy 3 sets of head gaskets for this project, or rather I had several in stock and I've had to buy even more to get it to work. It's very much a case of Goldilocks syndrome, where you've got too big, too small, and just right. So let me warn you guys off of making some of these trial and error mistakes that I've made. Okay, let's take a look at the 350 gasket, right, and how it fits. I mean, technically, any of these 3 gaskets that I have in my possession would work. And you'd be tempted, right, to say, all right, this fits, it's going to work, the motor's going to run, let me use it, right? Now, this is not a Fel-Pro, but I do have a Fel-Pro 350 gasket, and it was the same way. Okay, so that's laying on there pretty close to where it would be. I've got 2 head bolts holding it. And for this cylinder head, what you can see is it fits a little too well as far as the bore size, right? That is, the chamber is such a size to where this head gasket, I know it's hard to see it, just comes out to the chamber walls, and in fact, in a couple of places, like right here, it actually is too small, right? It's overlapping the chamber. In the same case in the block, you'd figure it's a 350, right? So 350 gaskets ought to work. Well, they're so tight, and because they're made by an aftermarket company, you've got a little overlap. There's another place. And you can see there are places where it doesn't overlap, right? So, ideally, you'd like to get this as tight as you can, but this is too tight, because what's going to happen is that fire ring, if it overlaps and is essentially laying out in space in the combustion space, is going to get hot. It's going to get superheated through the cycling, and it's going to create detonation, right? So now even with aluminum heads, your engine is going to be pinging, and I've got a reasonable compression ratio too, and that would be just impossible. You'd be pulling your hair out forever trying to figure out why the engine is pinging and why it's destroying itself. And with cast pistons, I'm not sure if the diesel block came with cast or forged pistons, but I'm using what was in there. Well, if they're cast, detonation's going to put them in a trash bin pretty quick, and all your work will be for nothing. Okay, so you can't use the 350 gasket. right? At least not, I think this is an ROL or the Fel-Pro. You can't use either of those. Now, I also happen to have a set of 403 gaskets laying around. And I figured maybe I could use those, right? Because every time you've got to buy new parts, you know, you're waiting. And this is, you know, this is what engine building is often. A lot of guys say they can build an engine in a week, and I don't know what they're talking about. Because you always run into issues that you have to wait. Unless you want to be a total hack. Okay, here's the 403 gasket, fellas. This is the Fel-Pro. And the number, I'll give you the number after I pull it off. Now you can see that this will work, right? Again, it'll run the engine. Here's the problem. It actually is such a big bore. It's like a 4.4. I measured it. That it's laying out of the chamber space to the tune of about 100 thousandths. Right, so what you're doing is creating excessive crevice volume is what they call it here. And that is, if you think about it, the piston's going to come up to the top of the bore, and even with this gasket compressed, you're going to get about 37 thousandths of space that is not covered by the piston, where gas can collect and separate from the fuel mixture and essentially create quench areas that are going to compromise your, you know, the quality of the burn in the chamber. So you really want to minimize that. And for that reason alone, I would not use this gasket. There is another issue with the dowel. It's coming close to the dowel here. I have to actually drill the hole, and I don't want my fire ring to get too close to the dowel. So anyway, I'm not going to use that one. Okay, so I, you know, waited an extra week, and what I did was, okay, so that's Fel-Pro 8507 PT, and that's the 403 gasket. Okay, I wouldn't use that. So I waited an extra week, and I ordered the 455 gasket set. I ordered the whole set from Fel-Pro. Now here's the number, and this is the one I'm going to end up going with, 8171 PT-1. Okay. Head bolts in to hold it, and these are all about 39 thousandths thick, right? So okay, now I measured the bore on this gasket, and it is about 4.250, 4 1/4, right? So as I center that, what you can see is it's completely clearing the chamber, and it's creating a much smaller crevice volume. I think if you have deep pockets and you order a chromatic gasket because you want a special thickness, for example, like 27